Hi, 4K friends. Happy Monday. This week, our theme is Pete the Cat. So, all the books this week are Pete the Cat. Today, we have 3 Pete the Cat books. We have Pete the Cat and the Super Cool Science Fair, Pete the Cat and his 4 groovy buttons, and Pete the Cat and the Bedtime Blues. So let's start off with Pete the Cat and the Super Cool Science Fair. Pete cannot wait for Friday. His school is having a science fair. See, he's got Friday X'd off on his calendar. Pete has never been a scientist, but he can try it out. Pete's teacher tells the students they will do experiments in groups. Pete is in a group with Callie, Gus, and Squirrel. Our experiment is going to be groovy, says Pete. What should we do? Let's build a mini submarine, says Callie. Or grow a giant tree, says Squirrel. Or invent an invisible guitar, says Pete. Why don't we make a volcano? Asked Pete. Whoa, they all say. Volcanoes are awesome. The group plans the experiment at Pete's house. His mom brings them snacks. Would any scientist like a cookie, she asks. They all raise their hands. The cookies are warm and gooey. The scientists check the big book of experiments for materials. They need glue, water, newspaper, paint, and a plastic bottle for the volcano. They need vinegar, baking soda, liquid dish soap, and a secret ingredient for the lava. I wonder what that secret ingredient is. Pete and Gus mix the glue and water. Squirrel and Callie tear the newspaper into strips. They cover the plastic bottle with glue and paper. It looks like a sticky white volcano. Oh no! The paint in the brown bottle is blue. What are we going to do? asked Callie. They can't find brown paint anywhere. That's pretty cool, says Pete. Maybe it's okay that we have a blue volcano. We'll be the only group with a blue volcano, says Squirrel. Let's test the lava so we know the volcano will erupt at the science fair, says Pete. Gus pours the baking soda and liquid dish soap into the volcano, and Callie adds the vinegar. Nothing happens at first. All of a sudden, a lot of lava starts coming out. Super cool, says Callie. The team high fives each other, but the lava is still coming out. It's a huge mess. Oh, Mom isn't going to be happy, says Pete. At least the scientists are ready for the science fair on Friday. When Pete and his team arrive at the fair, they see all the other groovy experiments. They all look awesome. Grumpy Toad and Octopus grew rock candy in jars. Emma and Marty made slime. We don't stand a chance, said Gus. Don't worry. We have the secret ingredient, says Pete. At the science fair, Pete's teacher loves the blue volcano. Wait till you see it erupt, says Pete. The whole class watches Callie pour the vinegar into the volcano. A second later, glitter lava gushes out. Everyone cheers. The scientists cheer the loudest. Science experiments are hard work, says Pete, but being on an awesome team makes them a whole lot easier. See, and they got the award that says coolest experiment at the science fair. The end. Next, we'll read Pete and the Cat and the Bedtime Blues. Pete and the gang had a great day. They'd been at the beach, surf and sun, and tons of fun. But when the sun went down, they didn't want the fun to end. Pete had an idea. Hey, how about a sleepover? More time for tons of fun. Groovy! Pete's place. Let's go! The party was far out, but they knew they couldn't stay up all night. The gang decided it was time to say goodnight. See, they were all looking quite sleepy. On went the pajamas, and out went the lights. Good night, Gus. Good night, Alligator. Good night, Toad. Good night, Pete. Pete was just about to catch some Z's when clap, clap, clap. Who did that? Pete asked. It was me, said Grumpy Toad. I don't want to go to bed. I want to clap instead. Pete covered his head. This cool cat needs to go to bed. Good night, Gus. Good night, Alligator. Good night, Toad. Good night, Pete. Time to sleep. Pete tried again to catch some more Z's when rat-a-tat-tat. Who did that? Pete asked. It was me, said Gus the platypus. I don't want to go to bed. I want to jam instead. Pete covered his head. This cool cat needs to go to bed. Time to sleep. Good night, Gus. Good night, Alligator. Good night, Toad. Good night, Pete. Pete closed his eyes to catch some Z's when he heard. Munch, munch, munch. Pete had a hunch. It was Alligator. He was always up for eating. What could Pete do? All the clapping, rat-a-tat-tatting, and munching was giving him the bedtime blues. Pete had a groovy idea. He got out his favorite bedtime story and started to read, first to himself and then to the gang. It says Pete the Cat and 10 Little Monsters. Pete noticed it was finally quiet. No more clapping, no more rat-a-tat-tatting, and no more munching. They all settled down. No one made a sound. Pete yawned and turned off the light. Good night, sleep tight. Time to catch some Z's. Tomorrow was another day for surfing sun and tons of fun. The end. Our last book today is Pete the Cat and his 4 groovy buttons. Pete the Cat put on his favorite shirt with 4 big, colorful, round, groovy buttons. He loved his buttons so much. He sang this song. My 4 groovy buttons. My 4 groovy buttons. Pop! Oh no! One of the buttons popped off and rolled away. How many buttons are left? 3! See, he had 4. 1 popped off. Now he has 3. Let's count. 1, 2, 3 groovy buttons. 3 groovy. Did Pete cry? Goodness, no! Buttons come and buttons go. He kept on singing his song. My 3 groovy buttons. My 3 groovy buttons. Pop! Oh no! Another button popped off and rolled away. How many buttons are left? 2! He had 3 buttons. 1 popped off. 2 buttons left. Did Pete cry? Goodness, no. Buttons come and buttons go. He kept on singing his song. My 2 groovy buttons. My 2 groovy buttons. Pop! Oh no! Another button popped off and rolled away. How many buttons are left? 1! He had 2. 1 popped off. 1 is left. Did Pete cry? Goodness, no. Buttons come and buttons go. He kept on singing his song. My 1 groovy button. My 1 groovy button. Pop! Oh no! The last button popped off and rolled away. How many buttons are left? 0. He had 1 button and that button popped off. Now he has 0. Did Pete cry? Goodness, no. Buttons come and buttons go. Pete looked down at his buttonless shirt And what do you think he saw? His belly button! And he kept on singing his song. It's all good. My button, still have my belly button. My button, still have my belly button. I guess it simply goes to show that stuff will come and stuff will go. But do we cry? Goodness, no! We keep on singing. Buttons come and buttons go. The end. Thanks for joining me, friends. I hope to see you tomorrow for more Pete the Cat books. Bye!